Hello everyone. Today we have with us a human behavior expert working on converting insights into business opportunity and strategy. Her core competence is in identifying future market opportunities, mentoring, facilitating business strategy development and implementation. She anchors Quantum Sri Lanka and in the business for 17 years. Roshini Fernando. Welcome to our discussion today.
Thank you, Kaushi. It's a pleasure to join you in conversation.
As a human insight specialist, how will you explain what people are going through today and how will they come out of this crisis, Roshini?
Kaushi, I think this is a much debated conversation of the current times. I'm not too sure sort of what answer, whether there is a definite answer for this, but I think what is interesting to look at is what is taking place. Crisis always creates a response action from people, right? And we've always seen that a crisis always causes people to adapt and change, and there is an inbuilt resilience in the human being overall. This is not Sri Lanka, this is humanity overall. So in this situation that Sri Lanka is going through as well, what we are seeing is there is significant social change that is taking place. So, and I think that is what we need to watch out for and look at what is the change, why is this change taking place. So there is, what is important for us to watch out for is the social change that is taking place. See, active citizenship like this has never been experienced in Sri Lanka, except in small pockets. But here we're seeing everybody, virtually everybody, voicing their opinion, demanding the rights that they have, and it is interesting. Even the women expressing it, marching out to the roads with carrying their kids, because they are demanding their right. And they're also demanding for stewardship, they're demanding for responsibility, and I think it is interesting to understand the change that is taking place. And we as the corporate sector have to ask a question also and anticipate that this is not going to stop with only demands from the government, but it is also going to become a way of life. And definitely these same very citizens are the consumers of brands. They are also going to demand the same from brands and corporates. Demand for responsibility, demand for transparency. And in the West, this is a big movement where consumers are asking not only for benefits from brands, but they are also asking what is the purpose behind this corporate? Why? And they're choosing brands based on purpose. And I think we are at an inflection point, and it is something that all corporates must take heed of.
Now that you talked of the corporate sector, let's get to our topic. Can corporate sector drive recovery of Sri Lanka? Is it really possible?
Well, before answering that with a yes or a no, I think a good thing to do would be to reflect on where has it worked. I think always we draw inspiration from something that has worked and then say how can it work for us in Sri Lanka. And a case study that has really impressed me is how BRAC in Bangladesh, I'm not too sure whether you've heard about BRAC, what it did in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh also went through many years of hardship and crisis. And today it is the second fastest growing economy in the world, right? And it has come to this place through a lot of crisis. And who stepped in to create the change? It was the private sector. And BRAC was a non-governmental organization that really came in to sort of work at the community level and to create potential and give opportunities to the grassroots levels who were struggling. And BRAC played a vital facilitating role in creating opportunities, creating livelihoods, because the government was doing welfare, but welfare does not sustain you, but you need to create livelihoods and create development. And then BRAC today has gone on from there into becoming a corporate sector entity, operating in the financial sector, in agriculture, in the technology sector, in many sectors, and it's a profit-making entity. So, and I think that is testament to how a nation has developed and progressed, and as a result, many other corporates also came on board, and this was one bold non-governmental organization that took the first step, and thereafter many other corporates stepped in, and many multinationals have stepped in to play a big role in the development and growth of the country. And I'm sure the same is very possible with Sri Lanka, and in countries where there have been a strong corporate sector, definitely growth can happen and will happen.
If you believe it is possible, what is the starting point, Roshini? What specifically should the corporate sector be doing? I remember you mentioned that interesting insights on how people are affected by the crisis. We would like to hear about it too.
Yes, so because sort of we are working with the corporate sector, and the corporate sector have a lot of questions with regard to what's happening in this crisis, how are the people dealing with it, and we ran a 100-member digital panel of homemakers, and homemakers meaning women who are working, non-working, but all these women were family women between the ages of 28 to 40. And we asked them some vital questions to understand sort of, how are they coping with the crisis, because of course we all hear a lot in the news of what is happening about inflation and how difficult it is to how the budget is affected, family budget is affected. It is true, but what is really going on deep inside we do not understand, and we do not hear of all of this. So we did this tracking panel, and it really revealed some very interesting insights, because one thing that we realized was there were 4 big compounded crisis areas that the people were facing. One, obviously, as we all keep hearing, it is the whole expanding family budget deficit that is happening, because the family budget is also in crisis, and these questions were asked from the consumer without any kind of prompting. It was spontaneous responses, and there were up to 79% who said, the gap in the family budget is a big issue that they're coping with. And the next highest, the next most critical challenge for them, where 60% said it was really sustaining health and nutrition, and health and nutrition being a very important factor that every mother particularly and every household is concerned about, given the kind of restrictions that exist today. And the third challenge that came up, with up to about a 65% claiming that mental and emotional trauma being a factor. And this is the very first time that we are also seeing mental and emotional trauma being spoken of so openly. Otherwise, these are all hidden. It is not easily spoken of. And the fourth factor being lifestyles really put on hold and aspirations being put on hold, which is a saddening factor, because up to a 40% claimed that to be one of their top 3 challenges of lifestyles being put on hold. And this work was done with the middle class consumer of Sri Lanka, and the middle class consumer accounts for about 25% of Sri Lanka's population. And Sri Lanka was declared a middle income country by the UN, and we were clearly on a progress trajectory. And now when the middle class is restricted and constrained in this manner, it is a signal of something serious to come, and therefore it is something that we need to seriously look into. How do we resolve, how do we help this middle class citizen in dealing with these problems? And there were some very interesting insights that came about there.
We most often focus on the economic factors when there is a crisis. But now I can see how real and big the mental trauma and aspirations put on hold seem to be. As you think how the corporate sector can play a role in these two areas, and one more thing before we wrap up, why would the corporate sector want to be doing this? What is their benefit?
Right. So a big question, Kaushi. So let me first deal with what the mental and emotional trauma is, give you a little bit of insight. There's lots of insights there, but I'll give you a little preview into what we saw and also the aspirations put on hold. So with regard to the emotional and mental trauma, as I told you, sort of it's being spoken about openly, and the fact that people are dealing with it and have to deal with it is interesting. And in situations like this, people are always looking for ways to cope with it. So we as the corporate sector also need to understand what these coping mechanisms are and why, and what are people looking for, right? So the message to the corporate sector is also listen and understand what people are going through, understand why, and then respond in whatever manner a corporate sector would like to respond. And I'm sure in this crisis time, lots of corporates have come forward and done a lot, but I think there is a lot more they can do much more meaningfully. So getting back to the crisis of the emotional and mental trauma, households are getting together as families, they're discussing the problems and issues. Children are facing a lot of tension, emotional tension, because the restrictions have been now 3 years consecutively, and parents are dealing with this with a lot of sensitivity, and as a family they're discussing what needs to be done, what needs to be restricted given the context of the family budget getting restricted as well. So it is interesting how as a family they are getting together to say let's solve the problem this way. From the smaller kids to parents getting together, and I don't think this kind of dynamic was prevalent before, and this is across the mass middle class that we're talking about. And the other interesting things where they're getting together and doing projects, the health and nutrition factor becoming important. So in terms of on the mental and emotional trauma, one is dealing with your own, and the other that has happened is that when you also look at other people who are more affected by this situation, there's a lot of social and community support that is happening. So when you start helping another who is less fortunate, that's also a way of coping with the tension and the problem. Your problem starts looking smaller because you see somebody else's problem as being more acute. So you're seeing community kitchens coming up, interestingly getting together, and all of these are supporting each other, social, class, ethnic barriers breaking down. These are all of the interesting things that are happening in the whole emotional trauma space. And even food is a little respites for in situations like this to have some creative food being made at home, right? And you have some enjoyment, a small space of enjoyment, and that gives you a lot of relief. So this is in the emotional space, and brands clearly have a big role to play in looking at how can I be providing some support system, because as human beings you're looking for support systems. You're looking for who on whose shoulder can I lean to find a solution to this problem. So brands have played a role, and this is an opportunity for brands to start playing a meaningful role, not to take advantage of the opportunity, but to play a meaningful role. And similarly on lifestyles being put on hold, also what is happening is there's a lot of resistance to give up on anything which symbolizes progress. And to the middle class there are many symbols of progress. One is the kind of food you eat is a symbol of progress. You don't want to give up the kind of food you eat. Then also technology and digital is a symbol of progress that you don't want to. And also self-care. Whatever personal care products that you use, beauty care products that you use. So there's a big struggle in terms of how I don't want to give up. But there are smart ways of dealing with it where, they are shifting. So interesting things that we saw of where, people were moving from soap bars into liquid, right? And for them it was a marker of progress, but there was economy also and stretching that was taking place as a result of this shift, right? And they're not wanting to give up on the lifestyle. So we met a mother who said, I bought a Bluetooth speaker for my son so that he can listen to music during the power cuts, right? So they are not that they are restricting everything, because they're desperately trying to hold on to lifestyle. Somebody who's had a vehicle and now cannot use the vehicle because of fuel crisis, you're forced to go by bus, you're forced to walk. It creates an emotional tension, right? There is a sense of I've really slid back in my lifestyle. So these are all, all of these come together with a lot of emotional crisis and trauma taking place. So I think my final wrap up to corporates is to say, come in to solve the problem with an authentic intention. Really get to know what is the real tension, what are the people going through, and then let's design solutions that are going to be sustainable solutions, meaningful solutions to the people, so that then this is the ideal time for corporate sector also to build a relationship of trust with the people, because when you come forward in a crisis time and genuinely help, then you know the heart of that individual. Like in a human relationship, the same is the relationship with a brand and its consumer. So I think that partnership is essential now.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Roshini.
Thank you, Kaushi, for inviting me. I enjoyed it and looking forward to some big impactful change.
That was an interesting discussion on corporate sector responsibility in the current context. Here's a call out to the corporate sector to come forward to play a role in putting Sri Lanka back on the path of recovery. It's your turn now. See you again.